Hello everybody, and welcome back to Dessertories. Today we're going to be looking at the history behind something called a trench cake. Now, as it sounds, this is a cake that was eaten in trenches during World War I. World War I lasted for 4 years, from 1914 to 1918, and estimates range from 60 to 65 million soldiers who fought in this war, which, guys, is just an insane amount of people to fight. That's just like my brain can't even get around that. World War I started after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, and then all sorts of countries jumped in along the way. Now, this cake was made for the soldiers. Their family members and loved ones would pack things and send it to the front lines, and so it needed to be something, or it needed to be a treat that could last the entire journey to the front lines, and that would also last while in the trenches. So if you think about it, nowadays we have refrigeration, we have delivery that comes either the day of or the next day, but there wasn't an Amazon around back then, so they needed to figure out how to make treats that would last a very long time. Now, trench cake is basically a fruit cake, and that is something that is very big during Christmas. And what is different about a fruitcake is that we add brandy, but we will get to that a bit later on in our story. Trenches, interestingly, could reach around 800 kilometers or roughly 500 miles, which is crazy. These soldiers would live in these trenches and fight from these trenches, okay? And was dug there to help protect them from getting shot. Like if you're standing on top of the earth, you are open to being shot. But these trenches put them down, so it also protected them. The tactical ancestor of modern trench warfare was developed by the French military engineer Sébastien Lepresta de Vauban for the attack of fortresses in the 17th century. But the American Civil War of 1861 to 65 was the foremost example of trench warfare in the 19th century. Okay, wow, that is interesting. So let's have a look at what is the ingredients in this trench cake. So we have plain flour, margarine, currants, cocoa, baking soda, brown sugar, vinegar, milk, nutmeg, ginger, and lemon zest. These cakes would last for months. All right, so now you're probably thinking, how on earth can a cake possibly last for so long without going off or getting all sorts of nastiness on it? These cakes lasted long because they used low moisture ingredients, and they also made it a very dense texture. And the dense texture is important because it limits all of the little areas that microorganisms can crawl into and then start setting up shop. And that is not what we want, because once microorganisms are quite comfy in their environment, they are going to start multiplying really quickly. Let's have a look at bacteria in cake studies. So microorganisms were found after a cake was left out, and they left it to its own devices, and then they came back a few days later, or however long later, and they took samples, put it under a microscope, and saw what bacteria they found had grown on the cake. So I'm going to try and name these bacterial and fungal species. It seems like it is very difficult. I probably will get it wrong, but anyway, let's go. So the bacteria that was isolated were Bacillus laterosporus, Staphylococcus epididymis, and Staphylococcus aureus. Okay, and then they also found fungal species, and this one is going to be very difficult. Rhizopus stolonifer, Aspergillus fumigatus, Aspergillus niger, Aspergillus flavus, Penicillium citrinum, and Penicillium chrysogenum. So as you can see, there were quite a few bacterial and fungal species that were found in this cake that they had left out. And that is disgusting, okay? There's a lot of nastiness that goes on when things go off. How did they go about preserving this cake? So as I said, this is like a fruit cake. So nowadays we use brandy. All right. So adding alcohol actually extends the shelf life by months, even to a year if stored and prepared correctly. So you must be wondering, okay, but how does alcohol actually preserve whatever we're putting it into? We're not just putting it in so that you can get drunk when you eat it. We're putting it in because we're hoping that it will extend the shelf life. Microorganisms need to be in a nice cushy environment so that they can grow and start building their family. Alcohol preserves cakes by lowering the pH environment. Now, microorganisms want to be in a nice neutral environment. That's where they find it nice and cushy. Alcohol reduces that pH and makes it more acidic. The trench cake, they don't have alcohol, but they do have vinegar, and that also lowers the pH into an acidic range. Microorganisms want to have a pH of 7, but fruit cake with alcohol falls in the acidic pH of 4.4 to 5. So you can see it moves it down. The microorganisms are like, oh no, this is not comfy for me, and then they struggle to multiply. Alcohol also dehydrates already low in moisture ingredients, and that breaks up the cell walls. By using all of these different techniques, the trench cake was able to last very long, which, as I said, is what was needed because of the long distances it had to travel, and also how it needed to last the soldiers that got their little treat from their families. All right, and that, my dear darlings, is how trench cake came about, which is essentially fruit cake. And I am so glad that you came to spend this little time with me. I will see you next time on Dessertories. I am your girl, Chef Cherie. I'm out. Mwah!